Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials. In 1989, the Philippine Legislature passed RA 6713, a law embodying the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees. According to a Civil Service Commission report on ethics and accountability in 2000, it is said that the code spells out in fine details the do's and don'ts for government officials and employees in and out of the workplace. These do's and don'ts are encapsulated in the 8 norms of conduct to be observed by all government officials and employees. An important feature of the code is the requirement of disclosure of assets and business and financial interests on appointive and elective officials and employees. The code of ethics include commitment to public interest, professionalism, justness and sincerity, political neutrality, responsiveness to the public, nationalism and patriotism, commitment to democracy, and simple living. Among the duties of officials and employees in the government service include acting promptly on letters and requests, submission of annual performance report, processing of papers and documents expeditiously, making documents accessible to the public, and acting immediately on public's personal transaction. Among the prohibition against public officers and employees are written as follows. First, no civil servant, officer, or employee shall be interested to work either directly or indirectly in any partisan political campaign. No one should show interest in any partisan political campaign, for it is their duty to serve the people and not the politicians. Also, this principle is very important to avoid conflict of interest and to maintain the integrity of our civil servants. Second, the law prohibits participation in any political activity. Public officials and employees should always be neutral in any parties or activities they are involved or engaged in. They are not allowed to participate in any political activity, for it is their duty to be neutral in any political parties even though they support either one of them. Take for example, during elections, public teachers are prohibited to campaign for any politician because at that time, most of them works for the COMELEC. That's why they have to be neutral with political parties. Third, public officials and employees alike are forbidden to strike against the government regardless of any cause or reason. Some public employees does not like how a certain government works. However, they are not allowed to go against it. Fourth, under the Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Law, RA 3019, as amended, states that the prohibition of graft and corruption practices in relation to the conduct of government affairs. So there is an existing law that prohibits corruption, and any public officer or employee who would be seen violating these laws can be automatically dismissed from their positions. Fifth, prohibition against buying of any public auction property at public sale. Any public property is not for sale, for it is funded by the government, but it is the people who owns it. Sixth, the forbidding of the law to appoint relatives, blood relations in the office. So take for example, during elections, again, any public teachers who has blood relations to certain running politicians are prohibited to serve on COMELEC. Seventh, unless justified by law, no elective appointive officer shall receive additional compensation without the consent of the Congress. So this one is self-explanatory. This is to avoid abuse of authority and power. 8. No candidate who lost in any election shall within 1 year after such election be appointed to any office in the government or any government-owned or controlled corporations or in any of their subsidiaries. Lastly, no elective official shall be eligible during his tenure to be appointed or designated in any other office, either in an acting capacity or in basis for disciplinary action. Under the Civil Service Law, the following acts shall constitute grounds for disciplinary measures, suspension, or removal from work of any public officer or employee. This is also reinforced under the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Civil Service Officers and Employees and the Moral Recovery Program, and the list of the following traits are as follows: dishonesty, oppression, neglect of duty, misconduct, disgraceful and immoral act, being notoriously undesirable, discourtesy in the course of official duties, inefficiency in the performance of official duties, bribery or other acts punishable under anti-graft laws, conviction of a crime involving moral turpitude, improper or unauthorized solicitation of contributions from subordinate employees, falsification of official documents, frequent unauthorized absences or tardiness, habitual drunkenness, refusal to perform official duties, disgraceful, immoral, or dishonest conduct, physical or mental incapacity or disability due to immoral or vicious habits, borrowing money by superior officers from subordinates, willful failure to pay just debts, and nepotism, and many more. A political commitment. The legal infrastructure that prescribes ethical conduct of public servant is reinforced by political commitment. This political commitment, while difficult to benchmark, has been demonstrated by some policy pronouncements. Quite significant is the 10-point action agenda of the government and the medium-term development plan, which embody the framework of the country's socio-economic development. The agenda and the MTDP place the implementation of a sustained training and orientation program on Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Law and on the Ethical Standards Act of Public Officials and Employees among the administration's priorities to reduce graft and corruption and exact high standards of ethics in government. Proceeding from this, departments and agencies of the executive branch have set up and implemented various programs that aim to eliminate bureaucratic red tape. One-stop action centers are now being promoted and institutionalized in the agencies. The role of the Ombudsman. It is argued that in democracies, bureaucratic organizations can be made accountable, either formally or informally. One method is through the ombudsman system. An ombudsman is a public official who investigates allegations of misadministration in the public sector. This government watchdog originated in Scandinavia, but it had been emulated elsewhere, though often with more restricted jurisdiction and resources. In other countries, the ombudsman is a legislative branch lawyer who intervenes on behalf of citizens treated wrongly by the bureaucracy. The ombudsman, according to Ruskin's 1997, has subpoena power, and a reprimand to errant officials is usually to set things right. The role of an ombudsman is to supplement, not replace, normal avenues of complaints such as administrative courts or elected representatives. However, as ombudsmen are concerned with wider administrative morality, their investigation and findings seldom have the force of a law. While the ombudsman system may strengthen the exercise of oversight and redress, it has been criticized as lacking of executive power. And because it relies heavily on the qualities of the incumbent, who is usually an insider. and that is according to Lazo 2009. In New Zealand, which in 1995 was the cleanest country in the world, based on the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, and other cleaner governments like Norway, Denmark, and Britain have all set up similar ombudsman system in their political bureaucracies. In the Philippines, the ombudsman has the badge of recognition as protector of the people. The ombudsman protects the people from abuse and misuse of government power for personal aggrandizement. The passage of RA 6770, otherwise known as the Ombudsman Act of 1989, made the ombudsman in a better position to execute his power, authority, and responsibilities. The office of the ombudsman assumes five major functions. These are public assistance, graft prevention, investigation, prosecution, and administrative adjudication. The framers of the 1987 Constitution defined the role of the Office of the Ombudsman as a watchdog to monitor the general and specific performance of government officials and employees. It, is, it also serves as a mobilizer to effectively utilize the support of non-governmental organizations, the youth sector, and other major sectors in the campaign against graft and corruption. Article 11 of the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines provides for the accountability of public officials. The Office of the Ombudsman is an independent and a constitutional office which cannot be abolished by the legislative. The appointment of the Ombudsman and his deputies need no confirmation by the Commission on Appointments. The composition of the Ombudsman shall be the Ombudsman, one overall deputy, one deputy for Luzon, one deputy for Visayas, one deputy for Mindanao, and a separate deputy for the military service. The Office of the Ombudsman enjoys fiscal authority to guarantee its independence. It also has the discretion to appoint its own officials and personnel consistent with the requirements laid down by the Civil Service Commission. The Ombudsman may not be removed by the appointing power. He may be only impeached on the grounds of culpable violation to the Constitution, betrayal of public trust, and the like.